The following is a special video presentation of the Hennepin County Library.
Hi, welcome to a discussion with Erin Elkins. I'm Eileen Cavanagh from the Hennepin County Library Program Office, and my guest today is the author of the Skeleton Detective Mysteries, and his newest one out is Dead Men's Hearts. Welcome, Erin. Glad to have you back
Thank
with
you,
us
Eileen.
for
Glad
the
to be
second
back.
time.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about this 8th mystery that you wrote. Particularly, tell us where it takes place.
I'm always a little reluctant to say that because people have started to think I'm in this for the fun of it, which I wouldn't want anyone to think.
Actually, I was going to ask you that later.
I picked my places. That takes place in Egypt, and it involves a cruise down the Nile and also some settings in Luxor and El Amarna, which is one of the old ruin sites on the lower part of the Nile.
And I suppose you actually reluctantly cruise down there.
Well, I have to, yes. IRS would be very unhappy with me if I didn't make a book out of it, I can tell you that. The new book that we're not going to talk about today that I'm working on now is set in Tahiti, and I just came back from a few weeks there. I talk to some of my mystery writer friends who go and do their research in flop houses in Detroit and bars in East LA, and I wonder what can they be thinking? My heroes go nice places and they have good taste. They like good food.
Certainly a lot more fun.
A lot more fun.
Tahiti especially. I've noticed, though, that's sort of a departure for you because your earlier Gideon Oliver mysteries did take place in the U.S., didn't they?
Well, three of them have. 2 in the continental U.S. But no, every book has been in a different setting. Somebody last year called them travelogue mysteries, and they are, and I don't mind that idea. When I used to read adventure or mystery as a much younger person, I really enjoyed Helen McInnes, Mary Stewart, Alistair MacLean, who would do the same thing. They'd move their protagonists around to different places in the world, and some of those books were my introductions to those places.
And probably got you where you are today.
Well, in a real way, yes.
Well, I think travelogue is, I think 2 things are fun about the Gideon Oliver books. The fact that you can go down the Nile on some armchair travel, and also the fact that you can learn something about anthropology in an easy kind of a way.
So.
It's certainly much better than reading an anthropology textbook.
Yeah, when I do read a mystery, which is usually on a plane trip these days, or when I've got 5 or 6 hours to kill, I have enough of a puritanical point of view so that when I finish it, I want to be able to say, well, this was only a mystery, but I didn't waste my time. I learned all these things about the Navajo from Tony Hillerman, or about antiques from Jonathan Gash, or about some occupation from Dick Francis. And I like to think, and I think I'm right, that there are a lot of people that feel the same way. In fact, I do get that as a response often. It's nice to read a book from which you learn something.
One of the other things that I enjoy about mysteries is taking them home after a hard day's work, because somehow a mystery is usually nice and tidy, and my life isn't nice and tidy.
Yeah. Well,
so
no, I think you're hitting on the reason that people do like mysteries. It is a classical mystery, traditional mystery, and that's what I do. Well, I don't want to call them classical, but that is the term we use for a traditional puzzle kind of mystery, whodunit mystery. It's a very welcome dose of order in a disorderly world. In these books, in most mystery writers' books, behavior, there are reasons for behavior. Behavior has consequences. In the end, the good guys win, the bad guys lose. Things get, as you say, tidied up, justly resolved. In other words, it's not like real life.
Just desserts, yes. Everybody gets theirs, what they
right,
deserve,
and that,
the good and the bad.
is satisfying. I enjoy the end of a book. I enjoy giving people what they deserve at the end. So I feel the same thing when I write it.
Sort of cathartic.
Yeah.
For the writer and the reader.
Mm-hmm. I never kill anybody who doesn't deserve it.
Well, I was thinking about all the subgenres that seem to have developed in the mysteries. We have hard-boiled mysteries
Right.
now, and soft-boiled mysteries,
Yeah.
and cozies.
Right.
And how would you describe the Gideon Oliver?
Oh, I don't know. A cozy, I
do
don't.
you slot them into it?
I think the only people who do that are well, interviewers, reviewers. I don't think any writer does that. I mean, when you're writing, you write what comes, and it's true. Sometimes you think to yourself, well, maybe if there's a violent scene you were planning, you say to yourself, well, I don't know that this doesn't fit in this book, and I better tone this down or do it off camera or something like that. But I don't think you say to yourself, well, I'm this kind of a writer or that kind of a writer. I don't feel like a cozy writer, although many people put me in that field. I guess I'm soft-boiled, kind of academic soft-boiled. If I was on a panel where we were trying to make the distinction between hard-boiled and soft-boiled, or what kind of writing we did and all. And I finally came to this as a definition, which I think somebody else has come up with before, that whatever kind of book I write, and many other people write it, it's about the people in it are people all of whom you'd love to have dinner with. And the other kind of book is mostly people you don't want to have dinner with. Raymond Chandler, in a famous quotation, remarked in the 30s that he was talking about the contribution American writers had made to the mystery genre. And he said, what the American, and he was talking about himself, Dashiell Hammett, hard-boiled writers, private eye writers. What American writers have done for the mystery is to take it out of the drawing room and the library and give murder to people who know how to do it. And I think that's true. And murder today is the kind of people that people in my books, they don't really kill each other. Academics, curators, I mean, once in a while, but that's not where the murder is. Murder's out in the street. It's over dope more than it is over anything else. It's mostly sordid and not very well planned. And that's another reason people like to turn to these books. They're not really about murder. They're about an intellectual puzzle in which you have some likable characters and you learn something.
Interesting, because you have networked, I assume, with some of your colleagues. In fact, your dedication in this book is to Dr. Charles Merbs from the University of Arizona, who apparently described a forensic case to you that you found interesting.
The cases always come from, Gideon Oliver has never done anything that hasn't been done before, basically. Sometimes he's luckier in getting to the solution faster than other people. He's the only forensic anthropologist in the world who solved all of his cases, because mostly those cases, a skeleton found out in some deserted part of the desert. Nobody knows how long it's been there. Usually they do not solve those cases. Gideon Oliver manages to be lucky that way. He finds the right piece of bone and he gets his cases solved. But all of the cases come from real cases. What Chuck Merbs did was describe a skull that was found in an empty lot in Phoenix, all dirty and had been there for many years. And so the police gave it to him to take to his lab. He's a forensic anthropologist. Carefully cleaned it off and found written across the temple numbers. So it was some sort of a museum or university specimen. But what was it doing out in an empty lot? And Chuck and I sat around one day saying, well, what would be some of the, how could something like that happen? And so I just kept tossing that around and around and around. It seemed interesting and came up with a reason for it to happen. So I solved it. Chuck never solved the real case, though. Never did find out what museum that came from or what collection.
So what you're working with is sort of the germ or the seed of an idea, and you're embroidering on that.
Very often it starts just with that, with something interesting, and then how could this happen? But when Gideon Oliver figures it out in the end, the way he figures it out, the way he puts together that this was a Caucasian man, 6 feet 2 inches tall, male, as I said, who worked for part of his life as a dental assistant, all of that kind of stuff, that does come from the literature or from what I hear from my colleagues.
Now, is it possible, for instance, Gideon often solves the mystery by determining what occupation this person held. In real life, is this possible, or only in the case of some unusual?
No, it does happen. You know, as you know, you've read some of the books. Any kind of habitual behavior repeated over time will leave its mark on the bones because the muscles involved strengthen, and the bones then develop ridges and buttresses that aren't there. So an anthropologist looking at the bones can say, well, this set of muscles was quite developed. This set of muscles wasn't. What could lead to that? Let me give
Even when there are no muscles?
Oh yeah, because the stronger the muscle, the more it roughens. It has to buttress the area that it's coming from. Let me give you a case that I'm using in my current book. Because by the time you get to read that, you'll have forgotten this discussion, and you'll get to the end, and you'll say,
I can look at the tape.
But you'll forget to. Oh, well, don't. Because I'll manage to fool you. But here's the case that I'm going to use. Discovered half of lower half of a skeleton near on a beach. Okay, no clothes or anything. The flesh was long gone or mostly gone. Now, when you find half a skeleton, there's something that most forensic people know immediately anyway. This is from the top of the pelvis down. If you find the top half or the bottom half of a skeleton, that's not a dismembering because nobody dismembers a body that way. You're cutting it into little pieces. First thing it tells you is it's been in the water for a while, because when the body floats, when the body first goes into water, it sinks. Then gases in the abdomen expand, and the body comes up for a few days until it bursts, and then usually down it goes again. When it floats face down, arms hanging down, legs hanging down, and the currents make the top half move this way, the bottom half move that way. The head also moves, but the head is relatively light, and the greatest stress is right at the waist, the narrowest point. So eventually, with the arm swinging that way and the leg swinging that way, they part. Okay, so
in the middle.
Yeah, so it came from the water. Fine. The anthropologist involved determined that it was male. It was, I don't remember the race, and I don't remember the approximate height.
And the sex they determined from pelvic
Well, the pelvis,
structure?
yeah. It's one of the things, if you have the pelvis, you can determine the sex 100% of the time. There's almost no other part of the body that will give you 100% probability on anything. But of course, for childbirth, the pelvis has to have a different conformation, so definitely male, yeah. The muscles in general were not heavily developed. I mean, there were no muscles, but if you look at the bones themselves were not robust, there was only one bone that had a lot of muscle development on it that showed that muscles had been heavy. That bone was the fibula. Fibula is the bone, the lighter, more fragile of the two bones below the knee, not the shin bone, but that other skinny bone. And it's the same sort of thing on a turkey leg. There's that skinny little bone, and it's a skinny little bone. The muscles that attached to the fibula had been well developed because the fibula was very rugged and had these ridges on it. Problem was, the muscles that attach to the fibula don't do anything. It's not used for running, it's not used. So the anthropologist was left with thinking, well, what could possibly cause this? The rest of the muscles weren't big. The person wasn't a weightlifter, wasn't a runner, wasn't a football player. Well, I'll make the rest of the story short. What he finally determined, and it took some while to figure it out because there was no database to go to. You don't have that many skeletons that you know the occupations of. What those muscles are used for is giving you stability. When you're standing up straight, then your balance is always tipping one way or the other. And without even thinking about it, the muscles that attach to the fibula help keep you steady, and if you tip slightly over to one side, it helps you tip to the other side. You're not even conscious of this happening. The only reason that those muscles would be terrifically developed was if the person spent a lot of time on some sort of moving platform. The first idea the anthropologist had was, is there a tightrope walker on the missing persons list? No. What he turned out to be was a railroad porter. He had spent 40 years of his life walking, never running, never heavy development, walking up and down a moving train. And in 40 years of vibrating and keeping his balance, it had built this terrific musculature. Now they know. Next time they find something like that on a skeleton, they'll know what the occupation is. Anyway, that's the secret of my next book, and you'll forget. Well, you'll come to the end and you'll say, you know, he was sitting right there and he told me, and I still forgot. Anyway, isn't that interesting?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's fascinating, and I think one of the things that makes Gideon Oliver so much fun.
Yeah, well, I find it intriguing, so I assume some people do.
You also write another series, though, about Chris Norgren, who is as far removed from anthropology as could be. Chris is an a curator for an art museum,
Curator
and I think
of,
he
Baroque and Renaissance art.
specializes in Baroque, and which is. Now, are you, as well as being an anthropologist, a specialist in art history?
No, I don't have legitimate credentials in that. I just love the art and like that period, and I do know how to do research. So I do that, and I do know who to go to ask questions of. And so the technical material on that, and there's always some technical material on forgery or conservation or something, is I'll stand behind that just as much as the anthropology.
So it sounds as if what you're saying is the key to this is not necessarily that you have a degree in a particular subject area, but that you know how to do research and get into any area.
I think so. Yeah, we do. My wife and I do well, we've done one book, and we'll probably do another about a female golfer on the golf tour.
Which is a wonderful book, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
A Wicked Slice.
Wicked
I hope
Slice.
it's still in print so
It's
that
still
people
in print.
can get
And
it.
neither of us even played golf at the time. So we went out and took lessons, not to learn how to play golf, but so we'd know what was going on for the book. And we got in ready touch with the LPGA, the Ladies Professional Golf Association, from whom we got scads of information about the golf tour and what it's like for a young woman trying to live on that tour. And then they put us in touch with some golfers, pro golfers. And so once again, there's something we knew nothing about, but we did the research carefully, and I have never had anyone write to us about that book and say you got something wrong.
And it would certainly be open to a lot of people who are well into golf as a hobby.
Yes, and the book we're doing now is, we've just started a second book. I've been trying to convince Charlotte to write a second book with me for 5 years, ever since that book came out, and she finally agreed, from which I determined that I must be much harder to write with than she is, because I wanted to do it right from the beginning. But now we're doing it, and this one is going to involve television more. And so we've already set up appointments with Seattle TV stations who are going to be filming some golf events to sit out in the producer's truck and watch the stuff going on.
So it will still have that golf flavor?
It'll still be golf. It'll still be the same person,
Well, it sounds like there's another key then, and that is knowing people to network with, and it also sounds as if in general people are very willing to share their expertise.
It's actually, the second one is more important. It isn't knowing people to network with. I guess we did have a contact on TV in the area, but we didn't use it. We just called the station and told what we were doing. One of the things I think every new writer finds out is that people are very willing to share their expertise. The way I approach is to say, and it's in truth, I'm going to be doing something in this book that concerns your field. I understand you're an expert. I would very much like not to make this silly, not to make what you do look silly, not to look absurd myself, and I guess I need some help in telling me. I've never been turned down. Well, the Egyptian police turned me down. They would not talk to me. But police departments in every other country have talked to me, including in Tahiti. And a previous book I did was called Old Scores, and it was about the art series, in which I needed some advice on laws of succession in France. I don't mean to the royalty. I mean in a will that's not properly laid out. How is the income, the estate distributed, and so forth. I went to a lawyer who I found out was the preeminent authority on laws, this kind of on wills in France. I didn't know there even was an expert in the U.S. He happened to be in Seattle. I sat in his office and talked to him for 2 hours, explained what I wanted. He had never heard of me as a writer, but he knew what I was doing while he told me what I wanted to know. Now, when was the last time you sat in a lawyer's office and got information for 2 hours and didn't get a bill.
Wow, I am impressed with that.
They always do it. Nobody has ever charged. Yeah, I think that's, a lot of times a new writer feels, well, how will I ever get information on how detectives work? You call the police department and ask if you can talk to a detective. They're interested in PR.
Wonderful. How about getting back to Dead Men's Hearts? How long a time did you invest both in going to Egypt and your research that you did before?
The research was, took about a month, reading up on Egypt and on the kind of plot I wanted. It involves a certain kind, although it's an anthropology book, it's a Gideon Oliver series, it involves a kind of, as you know, turns around a certain kind of art in Egypt, Amarna art, which has, from the age of Amarna, which has certain peculiarities. So probably a month, maybe a little more on that. And then I spent about 3 weeks in Egypt, which is probably actually more time than I needed, because I find my sharpest impressions of any place are in the first few days, and that I take scads of notes all the time, and then I transcribe them every single night, and when I get back, I put them on the computer in a kind of a encyclopedic sort of format. So there are usually about 80 pages of notes when I come back from a trip under subjects. So I'll have subjects like brand names, and I'll have down what kind of cigarettes do they smoke? What's the name of the local newspaper? What's the name of the magazine? What kind of soft drinks are there? What's the name of the local beer? Is there a local wine? So that you can, that gives a book density, you know, and makes it real. And I have page after page of material like that. But the longer I stay, well, I think it's true of any travel. The longer you stay someplace, the more you begin to take it for granted, and the less sharp your perceptions become. Things don't jump out at you.
The things that struck you immediately as being different from
you're used
are
to.
gone.
Yeah.
What happens if, when you get home to this 80 pages worth of notes, that you think, aha, I forgot to ask something, I missed something here?
Well, if it's set in Bend, Oregon, as an earlier book was, you go back. If it's set in Egypt, you fake it.
Which is fair, because
by fake it,
it's
I mean,
fiction.
Well, no, but by fake it, I don't mean lie. I mean work around. The sort of thing that would happen would be, I have Gideon Oliver stepping off the curb just as, and then I stop and say, wait a minute, does that village have curbs? Because, you know, if I have him stepping off a curb in some tiny village that nobody ever heard of and there is no curb, I will hear about it. I will get letters. Mystery readers are very finicky on this kind of thing. It has to be right, and there will have been some readers who have been to that place. So I don't lie about it, but I fudge. I don't make a reference to a curb. He steps into the street, and if I forget if it's mud or paved, then I can't mention that. But the more of those things you can't mention, the less texture the book has. And so by now, having made so many trips, I know pretty much what to. Those encyclopedias, many encyclopedias that I come back with, look the same. They have the same headings.
You went to Egypt with Barbara Mertz,
I did.
who was sort of an on-board expert.
She sure was. I went with my wife Charlotte and Barbara Mertz, who, as you know, is an Egyptologist and also writes about an Egyptologist in under her Elizabeth Peters pen name, writes about Amelia Peabody. Yeah, so I had our own expert on board.
Which always helps.
Yeah, and it was like having Amelia Peabody with us.
Well, I want to say I learned some new vocabulary in this book too, that I had to go to my dictionary because I didn't know. Arlo Gerber, who is one of the characters in Dead Men's Hearts, is head of an epigraphic unit.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't have a clue about what an epigraphic unit was. So
And now you know.
So, and maybe you'd share that with the audience.
Well, it's epigraphy is the scholarly. It's more than the translation from stones and tablets, say from ancient Egypt. It involves photography and drawing, translation, of course, of the science of interpreting the written materials, and for that matter, the pictorial materials, from an ancient culture. I think it may only be used in reference to Egypt. I don't know. Do you know? Do you remember if your dictionary said that?
No, it didn't. It didn't say that.
I'm probably wrong, but I've never run into anyone who called
My
himself.
dictionary was a very brief one, and I think all it said about it was that its epigrams are inscriptions.
Oh, okay. Well, it is that, but it's more than inscriptions. It's also pictures. I think of inscriptions as being words, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We may be wrong on that, but I think it is. So it's pictures, and it's even the way the stones are laid. It's the interpretation of the material. But it undoubtedly, probably the early epigraphers were translators of the inscriptions. It's much more than that now.
The other word that I learned, except that I'm not sure I still know what it means, is stela, S-T-E-L-A. My dictionary said it was an inscribed stone slab or column used as a commemorative.
Yeah, it's actually S-T-E-L-A-E, plural.
Okay.
And yeah, that's what it is. A freestanding stone that's used as a boundary marker or has some kind of inscription on it. Yeah, and they usually stand by themselves. You don't have groups of them.
This book more
And those are the only two words you learned?
I think those are the only two
Wow,
words.
you must be educated.
We just have a couple of minutes left, but I wanted to add that I noticed in the press release that all 7 of your previous books, since Dead Man's Heart is the 8th, are coming out in paperback format by Mysterious.
Yeah.
So it must be fun to see the whole body of your work.
Yeah. Well, they're actually, nothing's ever gone out of print for me. I'm one of those lucky authors, but they're bringing them all out with a different pictorial format. Up to now, they've all had bones on the cover, and I guess my publisher feels that now I have the bone market, and it's time to go off after another one. So each of the books will be like Dead Men's Hearts, a circle in which is some kind of geographic picture of the setting.
Well, I had so much more I wanted to ask you about, including some of your new books, and that'll be set in Tahiti, but we're out of time.
Are you telling me the 27 minutes is
The
up?
27 minutes is gone. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks a lot, Eileen.
Good work you've done.
Thank you.
Join us again for a discussion with
A presentation of the Hennepin County Library.